Hi there, it's Tara, she of all things transformational. Today we're going to do some simple exercises to nourish the spine. And these are typically called cat-cow. I learned them called the spinal waves. But either way, the idea here is we're going to move through the ranges of motion that the spine can move through so that we can nourish the entire vertebral spinal column as well as the cerebral spinal fluid and actually the hips and the shoulders and other joints of the body. So today what you're going to need is not much really, although I am going to show some variations. The main thing that you're going to need is a blanket. And I'm going to show a variation with a chair, and I'm also going to use some blocks for another variation because, different people have different things going on, so I want to try to cover the bases. However, a blanket should do, and if you're on a carpeted floor, you could probably even get away with skipping that. So just real quick before we start our exercise, I just wanted to talk about what flexion is and what extension is in the body. Flexion is when you bring two parts of the body together, as in, a bicep curl, you're flexing your elbow. Extension is when you move those two parts of the body away from each other, as in opening up the arm. So when we're talking about the spine, flexion is when you're rounding the spine, kind of like a beach ball. And extension is when you're bringing the spine into length and kind of opening up the front of the body. So most of our waking day is spent in a combination of flexion and extension, right? Because we're not just standing the whole day long. We're doing things like sitting. So the hips are in flexion and it puts a little bit of flexion into the spine. Or we're walking, which is a little bit of flexion. But also the extension is compromised because of gravity. So we kind of get, we tend to get drawn forward. And it's not really, super great for the spine to kind of stagnate in that position of semi flexion, semi extension. So it's really helpful for us to move through the variety of movements. And I'm going to get a little toy that I love to use to demonstrate some of the movements. So I showed you flexion and extension briefly. Then there's twisting. And then there's lateral flexion. And I'm using one of these, toy wooden snakes that maybe you've had. And what's cool about these toy wooden snakes is you can't twist them. They cannot do flexion and extension along, the vertical axis. All they can do is lateral flexion. This is the side line. And so lateral flexion in a human is when we go side to side like this without rotation and from a neutral spine. So we're going to play with all of these different combinations on hands and knees. But I'm going to show you a couple cheat variations that you can do if you don't even want to get on hands and knees. So say you just want to nourish the spine a little bit and you don't want to get down on the floor, and maybe you're at work or, making dinner or something like that. You just want to kind of down and dirty, get some good work in. What you can do is you can bend the knees and place the hands just above the knees with my legs. My legs are pretty wide, maybe a couple feet apart, toes turned out. And so I'm going to call this about a neutral spine here. Notice I'm not letting the head drop, nor am I picking my eyes up to look across the room. It's kind of more or less neutral with my tailbone. And from here, I'm going to tuck my tailbone, lift the abdomen by contracting the abdominal muscles, and tuck the chin. When I do this, my hands get super light. I don't even really need them. And this is spinal flexion. Then, to come into extension, I'm going to release the contraction of the belly, flip the tailbone up, Draw the shoulder blades together. I imagine I'm pinching like a pencil eraser between my shoulder blades. And I'm going to look up, not all the way across the room, but kind of to the floor about 4 or 5 feet in front of me. To add the breath in, you exhale when you tuck the tailbone under, lifting the belly, tucking the chin. And you inhale when you flip the tailbone up, lengthening the front of the body, contracting the back muscles, drawing the shoulder blades together, and bringing the eyes to look ahead on the floor. So exhale. Inhale. And this is basic cat-cow standing. Okay. Now we're going to do it on hands and knees a little more traditionally. So I have this one blanket here, and it's folded in this position, this shape. And you could use, any kind of rather firm blanket will do, or a beach towel or something like that. I'm going to have this under the shins, and I like to have the edge of the blanket just under the curve of the ankle. And by the way, if your feet tend to cramp, you can have 2 blankets and that'll help. And just make sure that you have the curve of your ankle supported, and that should help mitigate the cramping. Then I'm going to have the arms arranged so that my wrists are slightly forward of my shoulders, and my knees actually are just a tad behind my hips. So this gives my spine plenty of room, plenty of length. I also spread my fingers, and I'm going to turn my hands out just a little bit. So actually, my hands are slightly wider than my shoulders. And so starting from a neutral spine, I'll take a breath in, exhale, tuck the tailbone, draw the belly muscles up, rounding the spine, tucking the chin. And then inhale, flip the tailbone up, let the belly muscles release, draw the shoulder blades together, and look ahead on the floor about 2-3 feet. Exhale. And when you exhale and you tuck the tail, drawing the belly up and the spine rounding to the ceiling, chin in, you can glide the hips slightly back towards the heels and open up the armpits a little bit. When you inhale, flipping the tailbone up, you can glide the shoulders over the wrists, drawing those shoulder blades together, gazing ahead on the floor, feeling your chest bone almost as if it's threading through your upper arms towards the wall in front of you. Exhale, glide back, tuck tail, lift abdomen, lift spine, tuck chin. Inhale, flipping the tail up, drawing the shoulder blades together, lengthening the belly. Feel the stretch in the belly when you do this. And look up with your eyes. And one more round. Exhale. Glide back. Use your belly muscles, even your pelvic floor muscles maybe. Pressing the spine towards the ceiling. Especially it'll happily press up through the upper back. Could you bring a little bit of that into your lower back? And then inhale, release the tailbone, flip it up. Sit bones can widen, glide forward. And when you do this, see if you can externally rotate your upper arms a little bit so the soft part of the elbows face forward. Good. And then come back. And I'm going to show a couple variations here to modify if you have wrist issues or, wrist issues primarily. So this is where we're going to take the bricks. And so if you have issues with the wrists, what you can do is you could take the bricks. Usually probably this height is about right, but maybe you might play around and see what feels right for the length of your limbs. So I'm going to have my forearms on the bricks, and essentially the same setup. Elbows slightly ahead of the shoulders. I've got the shins supported, and you can make sure, and I might move this blanket back a little bit so that the ankles have that support I was talking about. I'm going to make sure that this feels right. I'm not popping the shoulder blades up, nor am I sagging down. And then you can go through the exercise the same way, exhaling, gliding back, lifting the abdomen, tucking the tail, tucking the chin. Inhale, glide forward, release, flipping the tailbone up, widening the collarbones, drawing the shoulder blades together, and gaze ahead on the floor. So that's one variation that you can do to save the wrists. There are a couple other tricks, but we'll stick with that one for today. Okay, now we're going to do twisting and lateral flexion. So to twist, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move my left knee forward and my right knee back, and I'm going to bring the right hand to the floor, keeping those fingers spread. Exhale and rotate into the forward knee, in my case, my left. Turning the chest open to the left. You can either keep your left thumb on the tailbone, or you can raise the left arm up. Good. And you're going to take a couple breaths here. Exhaling, rotating as you release. And bringing that left hand down, slide the right knee back, right knee forward, left knee back, and exhale to the right. Rotating the chest open to the right. You can hook the thumb on the tailbone and or open up the right arm. Couple deep breaths. And release. Let's do it one more time in each direction. Right hand down, slide the left knee forward, right knee back. Exhale, rotate the chest open to the left. Take a deep breath. If you wish to raise the arm up, you can. Exhale. Good. And release. Left hand down, right knee forward, left knee back. Rotate open to the right. Good. And open up. Excellent. And then coming back down. Now we're going to laterally flex. And so again, you're going to just have that position where you have the wrists slightly ahead of the shoulders. And we're going to bring the spine somewhat to neutral again with a slight lift of the belly button towards the spine. So you're not rounding the spine, but you're also not letting it sag. So just a little teensy lift. And then you're going to draw your left ear towards your left hip, left shoulder towards your left hip, without twisting the spine or giving into the temptation to look behind you. And I promise your brain and your eyes are going to try to overrule, and they're going to try to make you turn your head and look behind you. But you're going to do your best to keep your face pointed towards the floor and squeeze those side muscles. And then come back to neutral. Make sure you've got that slight engagement of the navel towards the spine. Bring the right shoulder towards the right hip. Bring the right ear towards the right hip. And breathe here. It's nice to breathe into the other side of your trunk. So when you're squeezing the right side, and you can breathe into the left ribs. And come back. And I'm going to show you the mistake that a lot of people make. So what a lot of people do is they sway. If I say lateral flexion to the left, they'll sway the hips over to the right and squeeze the right hip and shoulder together this way, and then they'll look over their left shoulder. So I'm going to encourage you to keep the hips centered over the knees, keep the face gazing towards the floor, and imagine that you're wrapping your left side around like a tree or a pole or something like that. So don't let those hips sway to the opposite side. And then come back to neutral. Navel slightly drawn towards spine, and you're just going to switch over to laterally flexion, laterally flexing to the right. Remember, try not to sway the hips to the left or turn the head. Good. And then come to neutral. And then you can start to combine these movements if you want. It's nice to just move the spine around, move the head, move the hips, move the shoulders. And actually, we're getting almost all the major joints here. We're getting the wrists, we're getting the elbows, we're getting the hips, the knees, the ankles. So you can really kind of get into this. This is a lovely time to put on some music and just move the body in space and relish in how you can hydrate and nourish your spine. This is how, moving the spine is how you can keep your biological age younger than your chronological age. So spinal movement is really essential. And if there's nothing else that you do in a practice, breathing and moving the spine can be very, very beneficial. So I encourage you just to play around with this. So we'll come back and I'm going to show one more technique, and this one technique is using a chair. Okay, so I'll just get this right out of the way. So you can use the chair, and you don't need a folding chair. You could use, any old chair. It's probably helpful. If you have a sticky mat, use the sticky mat. If you don't, just make sure that the chair can't slide really, okay? So I'm going to bring my hands to the chair back, and I'm going to walk my feet back and come into kind of a situation that's mimicking when I was on my hands and knees. So my wrists are a little ahead of my shoulders. I've got my feet a little bit behind the hips. I'm going to take a deep breath, and then I'm going to exhale, bend the knees, tuck the tail, press the spine back, and tuck the chin. Then I'm going to inhale, open up the knees, guide the hips forward. I'm putting a lot of pressure into the chair back here. I'm going to draw those shoulder blades together, lift my eyes up, and this is extension. Exhale. Use the exhale on the belly muscles. Lift the abdomen, tuck the tail. Keep the knees a little bent, please. Inhale. And come up. This is like an upward facing dog, right? Or cobra. Exhale, flexion, rounding that spine like a beach ball. Inhale, extension. Good. And then you can come back up and check in with yourself in a Tadasana. So another quick tip, another way you can use this when you're just kind of like in your daily life, this is a great thing. You can do it on the edge of a sink. And what's cool about that is, if you like a kitchen sink that might have a little more width, is you can hook your hands into the sink and kind of pull back and do these exercises and, draw yourself forward a little bit. So kitchen sinks are really great because you can kind of hook onto them. And I mean, I've done this like everywhere, park benches, car bumpers. This is the kind of thing that you can integrate this little mini practice anywhere in your life. And while it's great to integrate the breath the way I was explaining, where you're exhaling when you round into flexion and inhaling when you come into extension, sometimes it's a little confusing if you're first learning this. You may, some people come into yoga and they're a little disembodied. And if that's you, that's okay. You're here now. Just stay the course. Don't worry about if you think you're not getting it right. Just start. If you have never done things like this before and you're starting to move the spine and you're starting to breathe, that's better than not practicing at all. Okay. And then as you get more familiar with it, maybe you get to synchronize the exhalations and the flexion and the inhalations and the extension. And you'll evolve and you'll learn and you'll grow and you'll get to feel into your body more. So even though I call this simple, I don't want you to think that it's necessarily simple for everybody. I see a lot of people who really do actually struggle with bringing the full spine into flexion and the full spine into extension for quite a while when they're new to yoga. So please don't be dissuaded by the word simple. Don't be dissuaded if you feel like you're not quite getting it. Just do some movement, because you know what? We hydrate ourselves in 3 ways. One of the ways is the obvious, by drinking water. Another way is by submerging ourselves in good water, like maybe an Epsom salt bath or something like that. And then another way is by movement. Movement hydrates the body, hydrates the joints, hydrates the fluid systems of the body, like the cerebral spinal fluid and the circulatory system and all these things. So movement. So even if your technique isn't perfect, if you're moving and it's dynamic and it's with intention, you are hydrating your body from the inside out. So I hope you got something out of this. And if you did, you know all the things to do, right? You give it a little like, you could share it with anybody who you think might benefit from it. You could comment and you could subscribe. Those are all super generous ways to support these videos, getting some momentum, getting out there and helping people. I thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Happy practicing. Namaste. Thank you.